Good morning, gentlemen. So today we're going to continue with the Consumer Guarantees Act, and we're going to kick off today's lesson by reviewing the answer to task 1 on page 2 of the workbook. So our answers A to H are as following. For Makayde, no, the CGA will not apply because he's bought the laptop for his business, for his commercial use. Ashok, he will get the benefit of the CGA because he's bought a consumer good for a household purpose. Sam will not get the benefit of the CGA because he's bought the drill for a commercial purpose to use in his job as a building contractor. Junfu's purchase of a tennis racket will indeed be covered by the CGA because he's bought it for a personal and consumer use. He's using it at a school tournament. However, if Junfu was purchasing a tennis racket as a professional tennis player, the CGA would not apply. Tip Top, purchasing milk powder for its ice cream will not be covered by the CGA because the milk powder is a raw material used in a production process. Tony's purchase of a t-shirt for his brother will indeed be covered by the CGA, even though his brother won't have paid for the t-shirt. He will get the same benefit as Tony does because it's a consumer good used for personal purposes. Tama purchasing a fishing rod to catch fish for him and his whānau, absolutely that will be covered by the CGA because the fishing rod is being used for household purposes. Jong's purchase of a kauri log will not be covered by the CGA because he's using that kauri as a raw material for the production process of making furniture. So the CGA guarantees. There are a number of CGA guarantees that consumers benefit from when buying goods and services, and businesses are unable to contract out of these obligations, what they must guarantee to consumers. These are as follows. Goods must be of an acceptable quality. Now we're going to look at that in a bit greater detail in just a short moment. Goods must match the description in the sample. So if you go into store and you've been presented with a sample of the product you're looking to buy, when you actually come to purchasing it and opening up the box to have a look at the product you bought, it's got to match the sample that you were shown in store. When services are offered and carried out, they must be done with reasonable care and skill. A supplier has a right to sell the good as well. So the supplier must have the legal rights to sell a good. A third party does not have an undisclosed interest or security in the good. So what we're talking about here is when another party, so another person or a business, might have a right to the good, and that can come about through borrowing and lending relationships, where one party, the third party, might have lent money to the seller of the good, and as part of security, as part of that lending arrangement, that third party might have taken an ownership stake or a right in the goods that the seller owns in their inventory or in their stock. So when businesses are selling their goods, they've got to be careful that they're not selling any goods that a third party, quite often a lender, has a right to because of a lending relationship that the customer might have no idea over, and the customer doesn't want to find out later on that a third party, potentially a lender or a finance institution, actually has a right to the vehicle or the consumer good that they've purchased. Goods are delivered within a reasonable time or at the agreed time. So when a business contracts with a purchaser and says, hey, you're going to get your product in 3 days, the good must arrive in 3 days. If the seller and purchaser have not agreed on a delivery time, it must be reasonable when the goods are actually delivered. And that will relate to the type of good that's being purchased, but we can sort of draw a pretty swift conclusion that many months or even years will most definitely be unreasonable. But for some goods, maybe it might be a custom-made good, it could be reasonable that it takes the producer a month or two to produce. So what's reasonable in terms of delivery time will relate to the product that's being purchased. Repairs and spare parts are made available unless specified. And finally, the price of a good or service is reasonable where unspecified in the sale contract. So in many service contracts, the actual amount that the consumer ends up paying is not specified at the start of the job. And that comes about because often it's not known to both parties the extent of the work that needs to be done. So the Consumer Guarantees Act protects consumers in those situations by requiring that the seller must charge a reasonable price when consumers are unaware of what that price might be when they enter into the sale contract. So warranties, guys. So warranty is a guarantee made by the supplier that sits outside the Consumer Guarantees Act that they will repair or replace faulty products within a set period of time. A warranty doesn't prevent the CGA from operating, and that warranty exists alongside the consumer's rights under the CGA. So some warranties will be in effect for actually less than the time that the CGA offers its guarantees. So if you buy a dishwasher and it comes with a 1-year guarantee from the supplier, it's likely that the consumer will still be protected even after that 1-year warranty lapses, because we would expect that a dishwasher to be acceptable quality would last more than 1 year. But within that 1-year period, if there is an issue with the dishwasher, the consumer is able to claim a repair or replacement under the warranty, but they would also be able to claim from the business under their rights. So guarantee of acceptable quality. So goods are considered to be of acceptable quality if they are fit for all the purposes which the good is commonly supplied for. A classic example here, guys, if you buy a watch, you're buying it because it's commonly bought so that you can tell the time. Acceptable in appearance and finish, and that's not being superficial. We buy a good, we want it to look slick. And as part of that, matching the samples that are shown in store, and it's also being free from minor defects. We don't want to have scratches or discolorations or marks on the products that we purchase. Being safe for consumption and usage, absolutely. It's essential that we buy a product that it doesn't poison us. And durability. So durability is referring to its resilience, how a product lasts, how it stands up to the stresses of the environment that it's used in. So if we purchase a watch, we might be able to tell the time, looks good, there's no defects, it's not going to poison us, but if it breaks when we're just putting it on, that means it's not durable and not of acceptable quality. So acceptable quality will reflect how a reasonable consumer would assess the good or service. And reasonable, we're talking about how a sensible and grounded person with the usual knowledge of an everyday person would view a product. So we're not looking at the point of view of a very fussy or very demanding person, because those types of individuals might have very high standards over the quality of products that actually might not be reasonable. So acceptable quality and its view by a reasonable consumer will reflect the nature of the goods. The nature of the goods, we're talking about examples such as durable goods, such as a hammer. We'd expect that to last a very long time, and my example here has got a bit of rust on it and still works very fine, versus a one-off good. So here I've got some disposable cups for our nice lemonade example there. We wouldn't expect our disposable cup to last more than 1, 2, or a few uses, but we would expect our hammer to last perhaps even a decade or more. Price, so it's understood by a reasonable consumer that a cheaper product is generally considered of poorer quality, of inferior quality, whilst on the other hand, a expensive good is likely to be of superior quality, and we would expect a more expensive good to be of a better finish and appearance, and also more durable. So any statements made about the goods on the packaging or labels. So here's got an example here. If the ingredients are saying that the product is gluten-free, absolutely it would be unacceptable if the product was to contain gluten. Any representation, so we've looked at representations in our Unit 7 and 8 there, gentlemen. So here we're talking about the claims that are made in advertising. So if a business is claiming or representing that a product does something, then it absolutely needs to do that. The nature of the supplier and the context in which the supplier supplies the goods. So a reasonable consumer would expect that an established corporate or big business with a track record would be supplying goods of a certain quality, and they would have higher standards of those more established big professional businesses than perhaps a flea market trader or someone at a farmer's market who's really just selling their goods and services as a bit of a side hustle. And look, we've got a bit of a catch-all here, and that's all other relevant circumstances in the supply of the goods. So what makes up a reasonable consumer's view of what is acceptable quality can also be impacted by other relevant circumstances. We know how dynamic commercial environments are, so there are a range of different things that could also impact on that view of how a good is seen as acceptable quality. Today's activity, guys, is to complete task 2 on page 4 of the workbook. Any questions or issues, please email me. Have a great day. Kia kaha.